assault causing injury after throwing a chair at your professor. This court sentences you to 30 days in county jail.
Judge, she kept disrespecting me in front of everybody. Calling me stupid, calling me so yeah, snapping.
The woman standing at the courtroom podium, dressed in a short white top and purple plaid skirt, was Madison Tate, a 20-year-old university student whose entire life had been a meticulously constructed path of privilege and zero accountability. She had just admitted in open court to violently assaulting her professor, and her only defense was that the victim had hurt her feelings. The sight of her flailing arms, the pitch of her voice, and the utter conviction that she was the real victim became the centerpiece of a viral courtroom clip that shocked the country. What Madison Tate didn't understand was that the 30-day jail sentence was only the beginning. It was the spark that ignited a chain reaction that would permanently revoke her future career, permanently stain her family's reputation, and cost her parents nearly $500,000 in a civil lawsuit. This story is not about a misunderstanding. It is about the fundamental delusion that violence can be justified by perceived disrespect. Madison Tate was not a victim. She was an aggressor who had been given a failing grade she believed she was above. She felt entitled to an simply by existing. And when her professor, Dr. Eleanor Vance, refused to bend the rules of academic integrity, Madison responded with an act of violence so shocking it halted the entire campus. Her defense that day was simple and telling. The consequences of her actions were not her fault. They were the fault of the person who refused to capitulate to her demands. The judge, a man who had seen everything from petty theft to triple homicide, watched Madison's emotional outburst with a cold, unwavering stare. He was not swayed by her tears, her accusations, or her attempts to justify an act of aggravated assault on an educator. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the victim, a distinguished academic and a woman of profound professional dignity, sat on the other side of the courtroom, quietly enduring the final, public act of character assassination from her former student. She had already suffered a broken wrist and a mild concussion from the chair Madison had thrown, but the psychological toll of being painted as the aggressor was perhaps the deepest injury of all. Madison Tate had lived a life where money solved all problems, where apologies were things you demanded, not offered, and where the rules always bent for her. The university had let her slide. Her parents had hired high-priced attorneys to make the problem disappear. She walked into that courtroom believing she would receive a slap on the wrist, maybe community service, maybe probation. She was wrong. The judge, tired of the culture of entitlement that protected privileged offenders, decided that day that a message had to be sent, and Madison Tate would be the messenger. Her desperate plea to the court, "Judge, she kept disrespecting me," was the only soundbite the world needed to hear. It perfectly encapsulated the colossal gap between her perception of the world and reality. In her mind, the real crime wasn't the projectile wooden chair. The real crime was the professor daring to assign her an honest, earned failing grade. She failed to realize that the rules of a free pass had expired, and she was now on a stage where the only things that mattered were evidence and the law. She was about to learn that in the world of adult consequences, an expensive skirt and a sense of victimhood could not stop a 30-day jail sentence, a criminal record, and a massive civil lawsuit. The viral video of her tantrum was the curtain call on her privileged life, and the cost of admission was steep, beginning with the judge's firm declaration of 30 days in county jail. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. The entire story of Madison Tate's entitlement and the consequences that followed needs to be understood in its full context, starting with the professor she's so easily dismissed. The next chapters will dissect the distinguished career of Dr. Vance and the toxic pattern of behavior that defined Madison Tate. The victim in this assault case was Dr. Eleanor Vance, a woman whose professional and personal integrity stood in stark contrast to Madison Tate's reckless entitlement. Dr. Vance was 48 years old, a tenured professor of macroeconomics at a respected, large state university in the Southeast. Her life was not one of inherited wealth or effortless opportunity. It was a testament to relentless hard work and profound dedication to her field. She was the daughter of Caribbean immigrants, the first person in her family to graduate college, and she had fought tooth and nail for every single credential she possessed. Dr. Vance's qualifications were intimidating. She held a PhD from a prestigious Ivy League institution, had published dozens of peer-reviewed articles on international trade policy, and frequently consulted for state and federal economic committees. Her macroeconomics class was a requirement for all business and finance majors, known across campus as one of the most rigorous and demanding courses the university offered. She was tough, demanding, and uncompromising in her standards, a reputation that she wore with pride. She saw her job not just as dispensing information, but as forging the next generation of financially literate professionals. This dedication meant she did not tolerate mediocrity, and she certainly did not tolerate demands for undeserved grades. Her colleagues respected her meticulous research and her principled approach to teaching. Her students, while often struggling, usually emerged from her class with a profound appreciation for the subject matter and an understanding that she pushed them because she believed in their potential. But for students like Madison Tate, who believed the degree was a guaranteed reward for attendance rather than a symbol of earned competence, Dr. Vance was a frustrating obstacle. Dr. Vance's grading was objective, based purely on merit, a concept that Madison Tate had never been forced to confront. Dr. Vance's office was a sanctuary of academic rigor, a place where she mentored students, conducted research, and held office hours. It was here in this quiet professional space that Madison Tate chose to escalate a disagreement over an academic evaluation into an act of criminal assault. Dr. Vance had spent 25 years building a career defined by intellectual honesty. In 2 minutes, Madison Tate sought to destroy that honesty with a tantrum. The professor's background, her status, and her professionalism were crucial to the subsequent legal case. She wasn't just a random professor. She was an authority figure who had earned her place through merit, making the student's violent rejection of her authority all the more egregious. The assault did more than just break her wrist. It shook her confidence in the very environment she had dedicated her life to. She had faced academic challenges, research obstacles, and the usual stresses of a tenured position, but she had never faced physical violence from a student simply for upholding academic standards. Her decision to press both criminal and civil charges was not about revenge. It was about protecting the integrity of the academic environment for all educators and ensuring that a precedent was set. A wealthy student's entitlement does not grant them immunity from a law, especially when violence is involved. The severity of the outcome for Madison Tate was directly proportional to the dignity and status of the victim she chose to attack. To understand why Madison Tate acted the way she did in the courtroom, blaming the professor for her own criminal act, one must first understand the life that created her. Madison was the child of extreme wealth, raised in a bubble of unquestioning service and immediate gratification. Her father was a highly successful real estate developer. Her mother, a socialite who prioritized image above all else. Madison had never truly faced a consequence she couldn't outrun, outspend, or emotionally manipulate her way out of. Her pattern of entitlement began early. In high school, she was caught cheating multiple times, yet the incidents were routinely scrubbed from her record after her parents made sizable donations to the school's endowment fund. She crashed a luxury car at 17, and the incident was handled privately, with no license suspension. She was given a new car the following week. This pattern taught her a dangerous, absolute truth. Wealth was a protective shield against personal responsibility. When she arrived at the university, she carried this expectation with her. She demanded extensions, argued with TAs, and complained to department heads if a class or professor dared to challenge her. She used her family's status as a conversational threat, a silent warning to educators not to give her trouble. Her file in the dean's office was thicker than most students' entire academic history, filled with documented complaints that had been consistently closed with the phrase, "handled diplomatically, student advised." The system had trained her that her behavior was tolerable, perhaps even expected. Dr. Vance's macroeconomics class was Madison's ultimate hurdle. The professor's grading system was ironclad, transparent, and completely impervious to emotional appeal or financial influence. Madison, who had barely attended lectures and submitted a final paper that was clearly plagiarized and poorly researched, earned a definitive F. In Madison's mind, this was not a reflection of her effort. It was an act of personal malice. It was the professor choosing to disrespect her. Her entire identity was wrapped up in the image of the successful, privileged college student. A failing grade, an F, was not just a poor mark. It was an existential threat to the narrative her parents had cultivated for her. It was a public declaration that she was, in fact, stupid and lazy, the very word she later screamed in the courtroom as her justification. The confrontation with Dr. Vance was not an attempt to negotiate a grade. It was a violent demand for the universe to correct what Madison perceived as a massive injustice, being treated equally. When she received the final grade notification, her response was immediate and furious. She bypassed the official appeals process and went directly to Dr. Vance's office, not for a conversation, but for a confrontation. Her long history of avoiding accountability meant that when she finally hit an immovable object, Dr. Vance's professional ethics, her only tool for resolution was the one she had always defaulted to: aggression and intimidation. She genuinely believed that if she was loud enough, aggressive enough, or threatening enough, the rules would eventually bend, just as they always had. The confrontation that would define Madison Tate's life took place on a Tuesday afternoon during Dr. Vance's posted office hours. The university was quiet. Most students had left campus after finals, and the few who remained were focused on last-minute administrative tasks. Madison walked into the department hallway with a singular, toxic objective: force Dr. Vance to change her failing grade. Madison was not interested in discussing the merits of her paper or the mistakes in her economic models. She simply pointed to the F on her transcript printout and demanded an immediate explanation. Dr. Vance, who was calmly sipping coffee and preparing research notes, looked up with her usual measured composure. She explained, as she had done countless times, that the final grade was a result of the cumulative poor performance throughout the semester, culminating in the final paper, which contained large sections of uncredited material. It was an objective assessment of work, not a personal judgment. This calm, professional refusal ignited Madison's rage. She started raising her voice, accusing Dr. Vance of being biased and racist, a common deflection in her past complaints, though the professor was an American citizen of color, and accusing the professor of trying to ruin her future. She invoked her father's name, threatening to have Dr. Vance fired and the entire department reviewed by the Board of Trustees. Dr. Vance maintained her composure, informing Madison that such behavior was inappropriate and threatening, and that the conversation was over unless Madison could discuss the academic work itself. Madison's escalation was textbook. When her threats failed, she moved to personal attacks. She began to hurl the insults that later emerged in the courtroom, calling Dr. Vance a lousy immigrant and a lazy woman who was only a professor because of affirmative action handouts. The sheer audacity of these attacks, directed at a tenured professor with an Ivy League PhD, was staggering. Dr. Vance, now standing up, pressed the panic button under her desk and ordered Madison to leave the office immediately. It was the moment of absolute rejection that broke Madison's carefully constructed facade of privilege. The professor was not backing down. Her entire life's philosophy, that she deserved better than what she earned, was being invalidated by one person. As Dr. Vance moved toward the office door to enforce her demand for Madison to leave, Madison spotted the heavy, wooden-framed visitor's chair. In a split-second, rage-fueled decision, Madison grabbed the chair. The entire incident lasted less than 90 seconds, but the impact would resonate for years. As Dr. Vance moved to open the door, fully intending to call the campus police herself, Madison Tate's entitlement transitioned into criminal violence. The side of the chair being lifted was captured by a hallway security camera, a detail that would later prove crucial in the criminal trial. Madison, her face contorted in a mask of aggressive fury, swung the chair with two hands. The chair, a solid piece of institutional furniture, struck Dr. Vance squarely on her right side. The heavy wooden frame smashed against her wrist and forearm as she instinctively raised her arm to deflect the blow. The impact sent a sickening, loud crack echoing through the quiet hallway. The chair clattered to the floor, and Dr. Vance immediately recoiled, clutching her arm with a cry of pain. Madison, having just committed an act of aggravated assault, stood frozen for a moment, the adrenaline of her entitlement momentarily overriding the shock of her actions. A graduate student in the adjacent office, startled by the noise, rushed out just as Madison was attempting to compose herself. What the student saw was Dr. Vance leaning against the door frame, her face pale, tears of pain streaming from her eyes, and her right arm hanging limply at an unnatural angle. The chair lay splintered on the floor. Madison, still operating in the delusional narrative that she was the wrong party, immediately started shouting at the graduate student, trying to spin the story before anyone else could speak. She claimed Dr. Vance had attacked her first and that the chair had slipped. The graduate student, quickly assessing the situation, ignored Madison and immediately called the campus police and an ambulance, focusing entirely on the bleeding and clearly injured professor. Madison, realizing her attempt at deflection was failing, grabbed her bag and bolted from the office, running down the stairs and out of the building. She was so convinced that her family's money could make the problem disappear that she didn't even wait for the arrival of the police. She drove straight home, expecting a phone call from her father's attorney to tell her everything was sorted out. Dr. Vance, in shock and searing pain, was helped to the floor by the graduate student. Her right wrist was clearly fractured, and the blow had been hard enough to cause her head to snap back against the door frame, resulting in a mild concussion that would lead to nausea and debilitating headaches for weeks. The professor was taken by ambulance to the local hospital. The medical report, detailing a comminuted fracture of the ulna and soft tissue damage, became the most critical piece of evidence in the ensuing criminal and civil proceedings. The chair, the graduate student's testimony, and the grainy security footage confirmed one thing: Madison Tate had used a weapon to assault a faculty member. Madison Tate's assumption that she had evaded justice was shattered less than an hour after the assault. The campus police, working with the city's police department, had a clear description, a license plate number, and the full timeline from the security footage. They arrived at her parents' multi-million-dollar estate on the outskirts of the city. Madison, having spent the last hour desperately texting friends and fabricating her own version of events, a story of a crazy professor who had tripped and smashed her own chair, was stunned when uniformed officers showed up at the front gate. Her parents, initially dismissive, quickly called their attorney, who arrived minutes before the police were granted access to the home. The attorney, a seasoned veteran of protecting the privileged, tried to negotiate, claiming Madison was under immense stress, and this was a simple misunderstanding, a battery of a minor degree, perhaps. The police were firm. Based on the professor's injuries and the clear video evidence, Madison was being arrested for aggravated assault and assault causing injury. The charges were felonies. Madison was led out of her parents' mansion, not in handcuffs visible to the security cameras, a final act of professional courtesy the attorney negotiated, but she was booked, processed, and fingerprinted like any common criminal. Even at the precinct, her entitlement persisted. She demanded a specific brand of water, refused to sit in the holding cell, and argued vehemently with the intake officers, claiming she was being disrespected and that the entire police department would be hearing from her father's people. She was indignant, not remorseful. When asked to provide her statement about the events, she insisted she was the victim, claiming the professor had cornered her and that she was acting in self-defense against the professor's verbal violence. This lack of reality, this inability to accept that her actions had immediate, life-altering criminal consequences, was precisely the behavior pattern that had led her to throw the chair in the first place. Madison's parents posted a substantial bail for her release late that night. She walked out of the police station with a new accessory, a criminal felony charge hanging over her head. The police, the intake officers, and the jail staff had all witnessed the same thing. A young woman so convinced of her own impunity that she couldn't comprehend the seriousness of her situation. They had documented every one of her entitled demands, which would later be used to establish her character and state of mind during the pretrial phase. For the first time in her life, Madison Tate was facing the unforgiving machinery of the state's criminal justice system, and her wealth was, for the moment, powerless to stop it. The university's reaction was swift, uncompromising, and absolutely final. Unlike in Madison's past, where complaints had been handled diplomatically, this time, the administration recognized the monumental public relations and legal risk of defending an aggressor who had violently assaulted a tenured professor. The incident had occurred on camera, involved a severe injury, and was already leaking into the public sphere through internal channels. Within 24 hours, the Dean of Students issued a formal letter to Madison Tate. The letter was brutally direct: immediate and indefinite suspension. Madison was barred from all university grounds, all campus activities, and access to all online platforms. The university then initiated disciplinary proceedings, which, unlike the criminal process, moved at lightning speed. Her student hearing was held virtually, with her attorney present, but the outcome was predetermined: permanent expulsion for conduct endangering the safety of others and breach of academic integrity. Her academic career at that university, and effectively at any reputable university, was over. Her record would forever carry the designation of having been expelled for violent behavior. The university also took a powerful symbolic action. They released a public statement unequivocally supporting Dr. Vance and condemning this senseless act of violence perpetrated against a dedicated faculty member. This statement was crucial for Dr. Vance's civil case, as it positioned the institution fully on the side of the victim, effectively hanging Madison Tate out to dry. The statement emphasized the need to protect educators and maintain a safe learning environment, effectively signaling to any potential donor or future student that this behavior would never be tolerated. The most shocking and perhaps most tragic collateral damage occurred when the Dean of Students fired Dr. Vance's administrative assistant. The assistant, an older woman with 15 years of service, was terminated for a failure to follow protocol by not ensuring the office door was locked during a potentially contentious meeting. While legally tenuous, the message was clear: the university was trying to establish that it had taken every step to prevent the incident. This small, unjust firing highlighted the immense institutional pressure that Madison's one act of violence had caused, showing that the consequences stretched far beyond just the aggressor and the primary victim. The official police report, complete with the graphic photographs of Dr. Vance's shattered arm and the professor's full statement, was secured by the university's legal team. They were preparing for the inevitable civil lawsuit from Dr. Vance, and they knew they had to show they had acted with maximum responsibility. Madison Tate's expulsion was not just a disciplinary measure. It was a preemptive legal shield for the university. By removing her permanently and condemning her actions publicly, they mitigated their own liability and ensured that the full weight of the accountability would fall squarely upon Madison herself. The university's attempt to contain the incident failed spectacularly when the hallway security footage, the grainy, 2-minute clip of Madison Tate lifting the chair and slamming it into Dr. Vance, was leaked to a local news affiliate. The leak, rumored to have come from an outraged campus security officer who had seen Madison's arrogant behavior during her non-arrest, was a tactical nuclear bomb. The video went viral within hours. It was dubbed the Chair Throw Karen and quickly surpassed 1 million views. The visual evidence was undeniable. A privileged-looking young woman, the very picture of entitlement, violently attacking a respected professor. The news affiliates ran the video on a loop, contrasting the professor's distinguished biography with Madison's rap sheet of college complaints. The public reaction was immediate, intense, and universally negative. Online, Madison's identity was immediately exposed. Trolls and amateur sleuths found her social media profiles, her family's business pages, and her private details. Her life, which she had so carefully curated, was suddenly a public spectacle of condemnation. Her social media was flooded with hate mail, her father's business was review-bombed, and her mother's charity events were targeted by protesters holding up signs that read, "Violence is not a passing grade." The viral outrage served as rocket fuel for Dr. Vance's legal team. They watched the public narrative unfold, knowing that the court of public opinion had already convicted Madison Tate. The narrative was simple. The hardworking, respectable immigrant daughter-turned-professor was assaulted by the rich, spoiled child who couldn't stand being told no. The media firestorm ensured that the judge, the prosecutor, and even the defense attorney were operating under intense public scrutiny. There would be no backroom deals, no quiet dismissal of charges, and certainly no gentle slap on the wrist. Madison's attorney attempted to claim the leak was a violation of her privacy, but the judge quickly dismissed this. The footage was part of a criminal investigation and an essential public record. The defense's only remaining strategy, to paint Dr. Vance as the aggressor who provoked the situation, was now impossible. The video showed Dr. Vance simply moving to a doorway, her back partially to the student, and then the student's violent, unwarranted response. The image of the chair throw became the defining photograph of Madison Tate's life. She was no longer just a privileged student. She was a national symbol of toxic entitlement and academic violence. The criminal trial was set for an accelerated docket due to the high-profile nature of the case and the clear-cut evidence. Madison Tate was charged with 2 counts: aggravated assault, a felony due to the use of a weapon, the chair, and the severity of the injury, and disorderly conduct. Her defense attorney attempted to plead down the charges, offering a plea of battery with probation, but the prosecutor, under immense public and political pressure, refused to budge. The prosecution's case was devastatingly simple, relying entirely on irrefutable evidence. First, they presented the testimony of Dr. Vance, who recounted the verbal abuse and the sudden, violent assault with professional calm. She detailed the physical pain, the surgery required to repair her wrist, and the fact that she was unable to conduct research or teach for the remainder of the semester. Second, the prosecution played the 2-minute security footage for the jury. The silence in the courtroom as the jury watched the chair swing and the professor cry out in pain was chilling. The prosecutor offered no narration. The video spoke for itself. Third, they introduced the testimony of the graduate student witness, who corroborated every detail of Dr. Vance's account and confirmed Madison's immediate attempt to spin a false narrative about the chair slipping. Finally, and perhaps most damagingly, the prosecution introduced Madison's own history of academic complaints, demonstrating a clear pattern of aggression against any perceived authority figure who stood in her way. They successfully argued that this was not a one-time breakdown, but the culmination of years of unchecked entitlement. Madison Tate was advised not to take the stand, but her entitlement once again overruled good legal sense. She insisted on testifying, believing she could charm the jury. Her testimony was disastrous. She showed absolutely no remorse, speaking only of how unfair the grade was and how the professor's comments had emotionally injured her. It was this emotional testimony that convinced the jury that she was not only guilty, but also a danger to the community. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They returned a verdict of guilty on both counts. The felony conviction immediately stripped Madison of many of the privileges she had taken for granted, including the immediate loss of her student visa, if applicable, and her right to possess a firearm, and it would forever complicate her ability to work in any licensed professional field. Madison's fate was sealed. The entitlement shield had cracked. The sentencing hearing was where Madison Tate's entire persona collapsed in a public spectacle that became the viral clip. Her attorney pleaded for leniency, citing her age, her bright future, now non-existent, and her parents' willingness to pay significant restitution. He asked the judge for a suspended sentence, emphasizing that a jail term would destroy her life. The judge, however, was focused on the principle of accountability and the need to protect educators. He looked directly at Madison, who was still trying to project an air of privileged indignation, and read from his prepared statement. He spoke of the breach of trust between student and educator, the severity of the injury, and the documented pattern of behavior that led to the assault. He noted that Madison had shown no credible sign of remorse, only self-pity and blame for the victim. Judge Asterisk, Ms. Tate, you assaulted a dedicated public servant who was simply doing her job. You used a weapon to settle an academic dispute. The severity of your actions, compounded by your continued denial of responsibility, leaves this court with no alternative. It is the judgment of this court that for the felony of aggravated assault, you are sentenced to 30 days in county jail with the remainder of your sentence suspended upon 3 years of supervised probation. The word jail sent a visible tremor through Madison. She immediately grabbed the podium, her entitlement shifting from defiance to panic. She hadn't prepared for this. Jail wasn't on the script. Her attorney leaned in to try and silence her, but it was too late. The dam had burst. Madison Tate, screaming, "Judge, she kept disrespecting me in front of everybody. Calling me stupid, calling me lazy. So, yeah, the video cut here, but the transcript confirmed she was about to admit to the assault again, justifying it by the professor's words. Her attempt to argue with the judge, to use disrespect as a legal defense for violence, only solidified the judge's decision. The judge slammed his gavel down, cutting her off mid-sentence, and ordered the bailiff to take her into custody immediately. The courtroom camera, recording her entitled meltdown, captured the entire truth of her character. Even when convicted and sentenced, she was incapable of accepting blame. The deputy standing behind her, a large man who had seen too many entitled youths attempt this maneuver, moved swiftly to place her in handcuffs, her screams of protest echoing off the courtroom's polished wood. The moment the handcuffs clicked onto Madison Tate's wrists, her privileged life officially ended, and her sentence began. She was immediately taken down to the holding cells, where the reality of the situation hit her with the crushing finality of a steel door closing. County jail was nothing like the high-end boarding schools or luxury resort stays she was accustomed to. It was loud, chaotic, and relentlessly cold. Her attempts to throw her weight around, demanding special treatment, immediately failed. The corrections officers, unimpressed by her claims of being an innocent student, treated her with the same detached professionalism they afforded every other inmate. Her request for a private call to her father's lawyer was granted hours later, only after she was processed and placed into general population. Her attorney could do nothing but process the paperwork for her 30-day stay and advise her to keep her head down. For 30 days, Madison Tate was forced to live a life stripped of all luxury. She had to eat institutional food, wear the same drab uniform, and share a small space with women who were incarcerated for reasons far more severe than an entitlement-fueled assault. The experience was terrifying and humiliating. The other inmates, who often recognized the viral chair throw Karen, showed her no sympathy, only contempt for the spoiled rich girl whose violence was rooted in a mere academic disagreement. The contrast between her entitled courtroom plea and her silent, frightened behavior inside the jail was immense. She learned quickly that her wealth and status meant absolutely nothing within those walls. The physical discomfort, the lack of privacy, and the sheer boredom of the routine were all factors in what her parents hoped would be a life-altering realization. But while she was physically broken by the experience, her fundamental lack of remorse remained. She still believed the core of the problem was the professor's refusal to give her the grade she deserved. When she was released 30 days later, she emerged from the county jail a changed woman, physically tired, emotionally drained, and with a felony record that would haunt her. Her parents, who had arrived in a low-profile vehicle to minimize media attention, rushed her home. But the criminal justice system was finished with her. The civil system, however, was just getting started, and the financial reckoning was about to be far more painful than the 30 days she had just served. Even before Madison Tate's criminal sentence was served, Dr. Eleanor Vance's legal team filed a massive civil lawsuit against Madison and, critically, against her parents, who were financially responsible for her legal defense and the judgment. The suit was comprehensive, seeking damages for medical costs, including surgery, rehabilitation, and future physical therapy. Lost wages for the time Dr. Vance was unable to teach or consult, pain and suffering, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The total figure demanded was a staggering $450,000. Dr. Vance's lawyer made it clear this was not a negotiation. It was a demand for total accountability. They had irrefutable evidence: the criminal conviction, the viral security footage, the medical records detailing the comminuted fracture, and the professor's testimony regarding the racial and personal slurs Madison had used. The civil case was, in essence, a guaranteed win. There was no defense. Left him out. The criminal trial had established the fact of the assault. The civil trial would establish the price of that assault. Madison's parents, through their lawyer, attempted to fight it initially. They argued the sum was excessive, the professor was already insured, and that Madison was under great duress. But Dr. Vance's legal team countered with a motion detailing Madison's history of entitlement and the irreparable damage the felony conviction had done to her academic future. They argued the high sum was necessary to deter future acts of violence against educators and to ensure Madison's family felt the financial pain commensurate with the crime. The final nail in the coffin was the emotional distress claim. Dr. Vance testified that she was now afraid to hold office hours alone and had developed anxiety and post-traumatic stress from the violent attack in her own professional sanctuary. This testimony, combined with the fact that Madison had physically assaulted a tenured professor with a career spanning 25 years, made the case a moral certainty. No jury in the country would side with the entitled, convicted assailant over the respected, injured academic. Realizing the futility of a public civil trial, which would only serve to further publicize their daughter's violent, entitled behavior, Madison's parents made the only rational decision left to them. They settled. The final settlement was confidential, but sources close to the case confirmed that it was very close to the $450,000 demanded by Dr. Vance's team. The money, while a significant cost, was less painful to the family than the public humiliation of another trial. The settlement included several non-negotiable clauses. 1. Full payment of the agreed-upon sum to Dr. Vance. 2. A permanent restraining order preventing Madison Tate from ever approaching Dr. Vance, her family, or her place of employment. 3. A formal, unpublicized apology that Madison was required to sign. 4. Mandatory, ongoing anger management and anti-entitlement counseling for Madison, with her parents footing the entire bill for 3 years. The university also made its expulsion permanent and final. Madison Tate's records were flagged, making it nearly impossible for her to transfer to another reputable institution. Her felony conviction, combined with her expulsion for violence, permanently derailed the life her parents had envisioned for her. Her one act of violence, fueled by a privileged rage over an F grade, had not only landed her in jail, but it cost her parents nearly $500,000 and eliminated any chance of her obtaining a professional degree. For Dr. Vance, the settlement was a validation. The money covered her extensive medical and therapy costs, but more importantly, it was an undeniable statement of accountability. The system, the police, the prosecutor, the judge, and finally the civil courts, had worked in unison to hold the aggressor fully responsible. She emerged from the legal process exhausted but vindicated, her dignity fully intact. She had successfully defended her professional ethics and proved that entitlement, even when backed by wealth, does not grant immunity from the law. Following the settlement, Dr. Eleanor Vance did not fade into the background. Instead, she used her platform and her experience to become a vocal advocate for faculty safety and accountability in higher education. The trauma of the assault, the pain of the broken wrist, and the public scrutiny were transformed into a powerful mission. She spent the following year touring the country, speaking at university conferences, sharing her story, and showing the viral video of Madison Tate's courtroom meltdown. Her message was unwavering. Violence against educators, regardless of the aggressor's background, must be met with the full force of the law and the strongest institutional consequences. Her advocacy directly led to several state legislatures drafting Dr. Vance's law, which sought to mandate felony charges for any physical assault against a university employee and to establish better reporting and security protocols in academic buildings. The university, in an attempt to repair the damage to its own reputation, implemented the most comprehensive faculty security plan in its history. This included installing panic buttons in every single faculty office, mandating immediate suspension and arrest for any student on faculty violence, and overhauling the student complaint system to flag patterns of abusive behavior long before they could escalate. Dr. Vance's career did not suffer. It ascended. Her reputation as a principled, unyielding academic was solidified. She was offered and accepted a newly endowed chair position at another top-tier university, a move that came with a significant salary increase and enhanced research funding. She continued to teach, but now with a heightened awareness and a stronger support system. Her students saw her not just as a brilliant economist, but as a survivor and an advocate, a living example of the consequence of entitlement and the power of professional dignity. Madison Tate, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. Her attempts to transfer to small, private colleges were universally rejected once her felony record and expulsion details were revealed. She tried to find work, but her conviction for aggravated assault, easily discoverable in a background check, closed every professional door. She was last rumored to be working in a low-wage, non-skilled position, a pathetic conclusion to a life that had been guaranteed success. Her entitlement had not only destroyed her own life, but had ironically been the catalyst for systemic change that would prevent other students from getting away with similar behavior. The story of Madison Tate and Dr. Eleanor Vance is a modern parable of entitlement meeting accountability. It proves that in the age of viral video and digital transparency, money and privilege can only shield a person for so long. The core of the issue was not a poor grade. It was the culture of impunity that Madison Tate believed she was owed. Dr. Vance's life was a testament to the fact that competence, integrity, and hard work are the only true shields against an unfair world. Madison Tate's life was a tragic example of what happens when that competence and integrity are rejected with violence. The consequences are clear asterisk. Asterisk felony conviction, asterisk aggravated assault, a permanent stain that barred her from most professional careers. Asterisk 30 days in jail, asterisk a sharp, immediate shock that ended her delusion of immunity. Asterisk permanent expulsion, asterisk the total destruction of her academic future. Asterisk financial ruin, asterisk the payment of nearly $450,000 in a civil lawsuit, a debt paid by her family, but a consequence that stained her name forever. Asterisk public humiliation, asterisk the moniker Chair Throw Karen, and a viral video of her courtroom tantrum, ensuring that her crime is the first result of any Google search. Madison Tate's defense, asterisk asterisk, she kept disrespecting me, asterisk asterisk, was the most shocking aspect of the entire case. It was a complete inversion of the truth, where the person who was held accountable for their academic failure became the aggressor, and the victim of the physical assault was blamed for her own injury. This defense, which was so easily dismantled by the video evidence, was the final, pathetic act of entitlement. The court and the system, slow as they are, ultimately functioned as designed. The judge refused to allow her wealth to serve as a mitigation factor. The prosecutor refused to allow her privilege to serve as a deflection. And Dr. Vance refused to allow her dignity to be compromised by an apology that wasn't backed by financial and criminal accountability. If this story opened your eyes, if you believe that violence and entitlement should be met with mandatory, severe consequences, then please hit that subscribe button. We are committed to exposing patterns of entitlement and demanding that the consequences are real, public, and permanently recorded. This is not just about one bad student or one injured professor. It is about the world we choose to accept, where character and competence must triumph over rage and privilege.